The planet Xyler 7 shone like a jewel in the blackness of space. Its skies were streaked with ribbons of green and violet, and its oceans glimmered with a strange golden light. It was a world of wonders, home to the Xylerans, a species that had ruled the planet for thousands of years. They were tall, elegant, and powerful, with skin that shimmered in subtle colors, reflecting their emotions. But for all their beauty and strength, they were a species bound by strict rules. Emotions were controlled, desires were hidden, and anything that suggested weakness was treated as a myth or a lie. At the heart of this world, in a palace that seemed to float above the crystalline waters, lived the alien queen, Xyra. She was the last of her line, a ruler feared and respected by all. Her eyes, deep and intelligent, missed nothing. Her mind was sharper than any weapon, and her presence commanded absolute obedience. But despite her power, she felt a quiet emptiness. In her long life, she had never experienced what her own people whispered about in secrecy, the human myth called the Climax. Her species considered it nonsense, a weakness of the flesh and mind. But still, the whispers had reached her ears. Human visitors had come to Xyler 7 for trade and diplomacy, bringing with them tales of emotions so powerful they could drive one to tears or laughter, even ecstasy. Xyra had listened with curiosity, but she had dismissed it. Humans were fragile. They were weak. They could not survive in Xyler 7 without their strange devices and protections, and yet there was something different about them. Captain Ethan Ward was among these visitors. He was a human male, tall, with a presence that seemed calm yet magnetic. He had faced dangers that most humans could not even imagine, and he had survived. More than that, he carried an air of certainty that intrigued Xyra. Where others showed fear or submission, he showed courage. Where others sought comfort or safety, he sought understanding. Xyra watched him from afar, noting the way he laughed, the way his eyes lit up when he saw beauty, and the way he connected with other humans. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. One evening, Xyra stood on her balcony, looking out over the glowing waters of her palace. The sky was streaked with stars, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about the stories humans told, the energy they described, the moments of extreme sensation, the way they celebrated life. These were things Xylerans had long abandoned, yet she could not deny that her curiosity was growing. The more she observed humans, the more she wondered if their myths held truths her species had forgotten. Her advisors, ever loyal, approached cautiously. "Your Majesty," one said, bowing low, "the humans are in the city. Captain Ward requests an audience." "I wish to speak with him personally." The ceremonial hall was vast, its ceilings high and adorned with crystals that caught the light and refracted it into a spectrum of colors. At the far end, Xyra awaited, seated on her throne like a vision of elegance and power. Ethan stopped, taking a deep breath. He had met powerful leaders before, but there was something about Xyra that made him pause. She did not speak immediately, but her gaze seemed to reach into him, assessing, analyzing, and understanding. Finally, she spoke. "Captain Ward," she said, her voice calm and melodic, "your species fascinates me. I have watched you and your companions, and I am curious. You speak of emotions and sensations that my people consider myths. I wish to understand." "Your Majesty, humans are simple in some ways, but in others, we experience life fully. Emotions, joy, pain, wonder, they guide us and sometimes they drive us. What you call myth may simply be a part of being alive." She had seen leaders and warriors, scientists and explorers, but few carried such inner strength. She leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "Explain," she said. "Tell me what it feels like to live fully as you describe." "Imagine a moment when everything aligns, your mind, your body, your spirit. When you feel connected to the world, to others, and to yourself. It is not weakness, it is power, it is clarity, it is the peak of life." She had felt many peaks in her long life, victory in battle, the exhilaration of command, the thrill of discovery. But what Ethan described was different. It was human. She could not deny a stirring of curiosity, a subtle tension she had never felt before. For days, she observed him more closely. She watched him laugh, watch the stars, celebrate small victories. She saw how he treated others, with respect, empathy, and courage. Each observation left her questioning her own beliefs. Could humans truly possess strengths her species had dismissed as myths? Could they achieve something Xylerans could not? One night, alone in her chambers, Xyra stood before the mirrored walls and examined herself. Her form was perfect, flawless, commanding, yet she felt a gap inside, a missing piece. She thought about what Ethan had said. The peak of life, she had never known it. Perhaps she had never allowed herself to. Perhaps it was something her people had denied themselves for too long. The next day, Xyra summoned Ethan again. "You will teach me," she said simply. Her voice carried no doubt, only command and curiosity. "I wish to understand what humans call the climax and how it strengthens you. It must grow naturally." They walked through the palace gardens, watched the glow of the oceans at night, and shared stories of their worlds. Xyra found herself laughing for the first time in centuries, feeling small joys that were alien to her. She discovered a thrill in new experiences and a strange warmth in trusting another being completely. Her advisors watched with concern. They whispered among themselves about the queen's unusual behavior, about how she seemed more human. But Xyra paid them no mind. She was learning something far greater than fear or duty. She was learning what it meant to be alive in a way her species had forgotten. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting golden light over Xyler 7, Xyra felt a change within herself. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. The myth was not a lie. The human experience of life, as Ethan described, was real, and it was powerful. She did not yet understand it fully, but she knew she had taken the first step into a world of emotions and sensations that could change everything. For the first time in her long life, the alien queen felt curiosity, excitement, and anticipation in equal measure. And as she looked at the human who had ignited these feelings, she realized that myths were sometimes truths waiting to be discovered, and that perhaps humans were more remarkable than she had ever imagined. The palace seemed quieter now, the stars brighter and the golden oceans more alive. Xyra knew that her journey had just begun. The peak of life was within reach, and with Captain Ethan Ward by her side, she was determined to find it, not as a myth, but as a reality that could reshape her understanding of strength, power, and existence itself. And so, the queen who had believed the human myth was impossible began to prepare herself for the adventure of truly living. For the first time in her eternal life, she was ready to experience what humans had called the climax. Days passed on Xyler 7, but the world outside the palace seemed different to Xyra. The skies appeared sharper, the colors of the oceans more vivid, and even the gentle wind carried a sense of promise she had never noticed before. She walked through the halls of her palace with a quiet energy, her mind focused on one thing: understanding the human myth of life's peak. Captain Ethan Ward had opened a door she didn't know existed, and she intended to step through it. Ethan arrived as usual, escorted by attendants who watched silently, yet with a hint of curiosity. He had learned to approach Xyra with a mixture of respect and calm confidence. They met in a hall lined with crystal sculptures that reflected the sun's light in soft rainbows. Xyra stood at the center, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable, though her eyes betrayed a spark of anticipation. "You have learned quickly," Ethan said, observing her. "You already notice things humans often take for granted. That is the first step. We learn to value the journey, the laughter, the surprises, the connections. Only then can one reach what you call the climax." This idea of experiencing life fully with courage and openness was alien but compelling. Their lessons began with the simplest of things. Ethan guided Xyra to the palace gardens, where exotic flowers bloomed in patterns that were almost impossible to imagine. Humans, he explained, often found joy in beauty itself. "See it," he said, "not as a tool or possession, but as a gift. Notice the colors, the shapes, the smells. Feel them without judgment." It was a sensation she had no name for, yet it lingered, insisting she explore it further. Over the next days, Xyra learned to pay attention to simple pleasures. She listened to the soft lapping of water against the palace steps, the whisper of wind through crystal leaves, and the laughter of humans in the market outside. Each moment was carefully observed, and each carried a small thrill that made her feel more alive. Ethan encouraged her to note her reactions, and she did so with meticulous attention. She had always analyzed tactics, emotions, and behaviors, but now she analyzed herself, and found herself increasingly fascinated. One evening, Ethan led her to the edge of a cliff overlooking the glowing oceans. The air was crisp, carrying the salt of the distant waves. "Humans often find exhilaration in danger," he explained. "Not because we seek harm, but because facing it teaches us courage, sharpens our senses, and makes us appreciate life. You, as a queen, already possess power. But courage born of curiosity is different from power born of command." She realized that the thrill of facing something unknown could awaken emotions her people had long suppressed. Days turned into nights, and the bond between Xyra and Ethan grew stronger. They shared stories of their lives, their worlds, and the challenges they had faced. Xyra spoke of her long rule, the wars she had led, and the burdens of power. Ethan spoke of humans' fragility and resilience, of their capacity for love, joy, and courage. Each conversation was a lesson in perspective, a step closer to understanding the human way of life. One afternoon, a festival erupted in the city below. Humans and Xylerans mingled cautiously, sharing food, music, and laughter. Zyra observed the humans' delight in these simple pleasures. She watched Ethan interact with children, guiding them through games, laughing with abandon. She noticed how humans celebrated even small victories and shared joy without fear of judgment. For Zyra, it was mesmerizing. She felt a strange pull, a desire to join in to feel what they felt. "Why do they celebrate so easily?" she asked Ethan. "Why not focus on growth, knowledge, or duty?" She had never allowed herself such freedom, such openness. Her species had always prized control above all else, considering emotion and pleasure distractions. Yet she felt something powerful stirring inside her, a curiosity, a longing, a spark of exhilaration that she could neither name nor deny. One night, as she wandered the palace corridors alone, Zyra encountered a Xyleran advisor who had noticed the changes in her behavior. "Your Majesty," the advisor said cautiously, "you have been different these past days. Observing humans, spending time with Captain Ward, it concerns some of the council. They fear your focus is shifting." "And what would you have me do? Remain blind to what is real, to ignore knowledge because it challenges old rules. Do not interfere." She found herself moving with the music, subtly at first, then with increasing abandon, feeling a joy she had never known. Ethan also taught her the importance of trust. Humans did not fear vulnerability when they were with those they trusted. Zyra, accustomed to being feared and obeyed, found it strange to feel secure in another's presence. Yet with Ethan, she did. Each conversation, each shared moment, strengthened her understanding of human connection. One day, they faced a small danger. A section of the palace garden had been damaged by a storm, and a crystal formation threatened to collapse. Ethan moved quickly to secure the area while Zyra observed. She felt an unusual thrill, not fear, not command, but excitement. She realized that humans thrived in moments of action, not because they were reckless, but because facing challenges awakened their senses and gave them perspective. "You feel it," Ethan said, noticing her reaction. "That surge, that awareness, it is part of what humans call the peak of life. It combines courage, focus, and presence." The sensation was intoxicating. She had always led with intellect and authority, but this was different. It was a sensation that made her feel alive, alert, and connected. It was exhilarating, and it frightened her slightly because it was so unfamiliar. As days turned into weeks, Zyra continued to explore these sensations. She laughed more freely, moved with less caution, and felt a warmth in her heart that she had long suppressed. She began to understand that the human myth of life's peak was not a weakness, but a form of strength her species had ignored. Humans were resilient not only because of their bodies or minds, but because they allowed themselves to feel fully. The palace itself seemed to respond to the change. The crystal walls reflected more light, the waters glowed brighter, and even the air seemed charged with possibility. Zyra realized that her own energy had shifted. She was stronger, more perceptive, and more aware. The myths humans spoke of were not lies, they were truths that her species had denied themselves. Ethan observed her silently, understanding the transformation. "You are learning quickly," he said. "And yet this is only the beginning. The human way of life is not fully understood in days. It is a journey, a series of experiences, and each moment builds on the last. You are on the path, Your Majesty." She realized that she had come to value his presence not only for guidance, but for the trust and understanding he offered. Humans were indeed different, fragile in appearance perhaps, but astonishingly strong in ways her species had long ignored. As night fell over Xyler 7, Zyra stood once more on her balcony, gazing at the glowing oceans and the stars above. She felt a strange exhilaration coursing through her, a subtle tension in her chest that whispered of discoveries yet to come. She had taken the first steps in understanding the human myth of life's peak, and already it had begun to change her. The queen who had once dismissed human legends now acknowledged that myths often held truths waiting to be discovered. She had glimpsed a strength in humanity that surpassed physical prowess or intellect. It was a strength born of courage, joy, connection, and presence. And as she watched the stars reflect on the golden waves below, Zyra felt a quiet determination. She would continue this journey, embracing the lessons humans offered, and perhaps, one day she would understand fully what it meant to experience life at its peak. With Captain Ethan Ward as her guide, she knew that the human myth was not impossible. It was real, and it was waiting for her to discover it. Xyler had never felt so alive. Each day spent with Captain Ethan Ward opened new doors in her mind and body, doors she had long ignored. The palace, with its crystal halls and golden waters, now seemed less like a fortress and more like a place of discovery. She walked through its corridors with purpose, no longer just a queen ruling her people, but a student of life itself. Ethan met her in the grand hall where sunlight reflected off the walls in thousands of small rainbows. "Today," he said with a faint smile, "we will explore something deeper. Observation and small experiences are not enough. To understand the human myth fully, you must engage directly with your mind, your body, and your spirit." She had already felt thrills, curiosity, and excitement, but she sensed this would be different. "Explain," she said, her voice steady yet tinged with anticipation. "You must allow yourself to be fully present," Ethan said. "Humans reach their peak not by command or calculation, but by surrendering to the moment, trusting it, and embracing it completely. It is a combination of courage, connection, and awareness." Ethan led her to the palace gardens, where the light played on exotic flowers and the soft hum of energy from the planet surrounded them. "Begin by trusting the senses," he said. "Feel everything. Do not judge, do not analyze, simply experience." The air was scented with flowers and something else she could not name, a subtle energy that seemed to resonate with her own body. She felt warmth in her chest, a tension that made her pulse quicken. This was different from the small thrills she had felt before. This was alive. "Focus on the sensation," Ethan instructed. "Notice how it changes with your breath, your thoughts, and your movement. This is part of the human experience. Attention and presence create strength." The myth was no longer a story. She was feeling it herself, a subtle surge of energy that made her more aware of everything around her. As the days passed, Ethan introduced her to challenges designed to test courage and focus. One morning, he led her to a section of the palace cliffs where the winds were stronger and the drops more dangerous. "Humans do not fear challenges because they are reckless," he explained. "We face them to understand our limits and expand them. Experiencing danger fully awakens life in a way that comfort never can." It was awareness, acute, precise, and powerful. She felt the wind tug at her form, the vibrations of the world beneath her, and the pulse of life around her. "Now," Ethan said, "step forward not blindly but with trust in yourself and the moment." Her body leaned into the wind, her mind alert and focused, and she felt a surge of exhilaration unlike anything she had known. It was as if the entire planet, the air, the energy, and even time itself had converged in a single point of awareness. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the conscious engagement with it. She laughed, a sound clear and free, echoing across the cliffs, and the sensation deepened. Back in the palace, Xyler reflected on what she had learned. She had felt moments of exhilaration before, but this was different. It was layered with presence, trust, and connection. She had begun to understand that the human myth of life's peak was not a single event, but a state of being that combined mind, body, and spirit. Ethan noticed the change. "You are progressing faster than I expected," he said. "Your body, your mind, and your awareness are aligning. You are beginning to understand the strength that humans gain from experiencing life fully." Humans had survived and thrived not only through intellect and strategy, but through courage, connection, and the willingness to feel. Their training continued with more subtle lessons. Ethan showed her how humans could find joy and exhilaration in cooperation, in shared problem-solving. They navigated complex mazes within the palace gardens, solving puzzles that required teamwork and quick thinking. Xyler realized that her own abilities, though formidable, were enhanced when she collaborated fully, engaging with another mind rather than relying solely on her own. One afternoon, as they rested near the glowing oceans, Xyler asked a question that had been on her mind. "Captain Ward, humans speak of Climax as if it is the ultimate experience. But it seems to me it is not a single event but a series of moments. Is that correct? Humans have learned that to feel fully is to be strong, and to connect fully is to be powerful." She was beginning to understand that humans, in their apparent fragility, possessed a resilience her species had long overlooked. The palace itself seemed to reflect this transformation. The crystals sparkled brighter, the waters shimmered more vividly, and even the air seemed charged with energy. Xyler's own form felt lighter, more responsive, and more aware of the world around her. She moved with grace but also with anticipation, ready to engage fully in whatever came next. Then came the first real test. A rival faction of Xylerans, long opposed to Zyra's rule, had launched a surprise attack on the outskirts of the city. Ethan and Zyra observed from a distance, the humans prepared to defend themselves and the Xylerans readying their weapons. The tension was palpable. "Observe carefully," Ethan said. "Notice how humans respond to danger. We do not rely on brute strength alone. We rely on perception, courage, and cooperation. These are strengths your species has overlooked." She felt a surge of admiration and a thrill that coursed through her chest. This was more than observation. She felt connected to the moment, to the people, and to the energy of the world. "Now participate," Ethan urged. "You cannot truly understand the myth from the sidelines." She moved with precision, guided not only by calculation but by intuition and presence. Every decision, every movement, carried a thrill of exhilaration that was both foreign and intoxicating. She realized that the human myth was real, and that it enhanced her abilities rather than diminished them. By the end of the confrontation, the humans and Zyra's forces had successfully repelled the attack. Xyler stood amidst the aftermath, her chest still humming with the energy of full engagement. She had faced danger, embraced presence, and trusted herself and another being fully. For the first time, she understood the human concept of life's peak, not as a myth, but as a reality that empowered those who dared to experience it. Ethan watched her closely, his expression a mixture of pride and admiration. "You have felt it," he said quietly. "Not completely, but enough to know it exists. Humans call it climax, but it is more than that. It is the full awareness of life in mind, body, and spirit. You are beginning to understand." She had crossed a threshold, moving from curiosity to engagement. The human myth was no longer distant or impossible. It was something she could feel, explore, and in time master. As night fell, she walked to her balcony once more, looking out at the glowing oceans and the stars above. The world felt alive in ways it never had before. She understood that this journey was only beginning, that there were deeper experiences to explore, and that humans, small and fragile in appearance, carried wisdom and strength that even her species could learn from. Zyra's mind was alert, her heart alive, and her spirit open. She had crossed the line from observation to experience, and the sensations and insights she had gained would guide her in ways she had never imagined. The myth was no longer a myth. It was a key to understanding life fully, and she had just begun to turn it. The sun rose over Xyler 7, casting long golden beams across the crystal towers of the palace. The air was alive with energy, buzzing with anticipation. Zyra stood at the top of the main balcony, her eyes scanning the horizon. Today, the rival Xyleran faction that had been causing unrest would make their bold move. She could feel it in the vibrations of the planet itself. For centuries, her species had relied on strength, strategy, and psychic power to dominate. But today was different. Today, she would rely on what she had learned from humans: courage, awareness, trust, and the willingness to embrace life fully. She turned to Ethan, who stood beside her, calm and composed as he had always been. "You are ready," he said. "Trust yourself and trust what you have learned. Humans thrive because we act with clarity and presence, not just raw power." Her heart pulsed with energy, a strange mixture of exhilaration and focus. This was no longer practice or observation. This was real. The human myth she had been exploring, the peak of life, was about to guide her through a battle where the stakes were not only survival, but victory, understanding, and growth. The ground shook as the enemy forces advanced, their ships and psychic constructs moving with precision. Xyleran soldiers readied themselves, weapons shimmering in the rising sun. Zyra's advisors looked at her with apprehension. Some whispered doubts, questioning her new methods, her fascination with the humans, her apparent openness to unpredictability. Zyra ignored them. She had learned that strength was not always rigid, and power was not always measured in fear or force. Ethan led a group of human soldiers into formation, standing beside Zyra. The humans were smaller and physically weaker than the Xylerans, yet they exuded a confidence and coordination that belied their size. They had survived countless trials through teamwork, quick thinking, and the ability to feel the moment fully. Zyra realized that she, too, could merge her Xyleran abilities with this human way of life. The first wave of attacks came swiftly. Psychic blasts tore through the air, and crystal projectiles crashed against defensive shields. Zyra moved like a storm, her mind sharp and her senses heightened. But unlike before, she felt each movement fully, aware of every vibration in the air, every shift in the battlefield, every human beside her. She could sense their courage, their trust in each other, and it bolstered her own strength. She unleashed her psychic power, not in cold calculation, but with full awareness and intention. Her attacks flowed like water, precise and adaptive, responding to the enemy rather than dictating to them. Every move was heightened by the exhilaration coursing through her. She felt alive in a way she had never known, her body, mind, and spirit fully integrated. The humans moved seamlessly alongside her, their small frames darting through the battlefield with skill and daring. Ethan coordinated their movements, guiding them not with fear or orders, but with clarity and trust. Xyra marveled at their resilience. They did not falter in the face of overwhelming power. They did not panic when plans failed. They adapted, learned, and thrived. As the battle escalated, Xyra found herself in direct confrontation with a rival commander, a powerful Xyleran who had underestimated her. He struck with precision, his attacks aimed to overpower her. Xyra responded instinctively, combining her species' strength with the human lessons of presence and awareness. She dodged, countered, and adjusted in real time, feeling exhilaration build in her chest. Every movement, every decision was sharp and alive. She realized then that this was the essence of the human myth. The peak of life was not a simple pleasure or a single event. It was the alignment of mind, body, and spirit in response to challenge. It was the exhilaration of awareness, the power of courage, and the clarity of presence. In this moment, Xyra was living it fully, and it made her unstoppable. The battle raged on. Enemy forces attempted to flank her position, but Xyra, sensing their movements, anticipated each maneuver. She guided the humans and Xylerans alike, not through fear, but through coordination, awareness, and trust. The enemy faltered as their attacks met resistance that was unpredictable yet precise, flowing and adaptive. Xyra's newfound understanding gave her a strategic advantage her species had never known. At one point, a massive psychic wave swept toward the defenders. Xyra raised her hands, her energy expanding, but this time she did not act alone. She synchronized her focus with Ethan and the humans beside her, each movement guided by awareness, trust, and courage. Together, their combined effort redirected the wave, dispersing its energy harmlessly into the sky. Xyra felt the surge of success, a thrill deeper than any victory she had experienced in centuries of rule. The enemy commander, seeing his forces falter, attempted a desperate attack. He aimed directly at Xyra, assuming that fear or control could sway her. But Xyra was no longer governed by old rules. She engaged fully, aware of her body, her energy, and the humans around her. She moved with precision and intuition, anticipating his strikes and countering with effortless power. The exhilaration of awareness, the thrill of action, and the clarity of presence culminated in a single, decisive move. With a surge of energy, Xyra incapacitated the commander, and the enemy forces began to retreat. The battlefield, once chaotic and threatening, now echoed with the sounds of victory. Humans and Xylerans alike cheered, celebrating together, and Xyra felt a warmth in her chest that was more satisfying than any triumph she had achieved through authority alone. She turned to Ethan, who smiled and nodded. "You have felt it fully," he said. "You understand now. The human myth is real. It is not weakness. It is power, strength that comes from embracing life completely, from trust, courage, and awareness." She realized that humans had survived and thrived not through physical dominance alone, but through their ability to feel, adapt, and connect. The palace grounds were filled with energy. The Xyleran soldiers, once wary of human methods, now looked at Xyra with awe. Her openness to new experiences, her courage in embracing the human way of life had not weakened her. It had strengthened her beyond what any rule or power could achieve. Ethan approached her, his expression calm but proud. "You have surpassed what I thought possible. Not because you are Xyleran, but because you allowed yourself to feel fully, to trust, and to act with awareness. That is the essence of the myth you once doubted." As the sun set, casting fiery colors across the oceans, Xyra gathered her advisors and soldiers. "Today," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "we have witnessed the power of life fully embraced. We have fought not only with strength, but with awareness, courage, and connection. Humans have shown us a path that is both new and true. Let this day mark a new era for Xyler 7, where strength includes understanding, presence, and the willingness to experience life fully." She had crossed a threshold, moving from observation and curiosity to complete understanding and mastery. Later, in the quiet of the palace, Xyra stood on her balcony, watching the stars shimmer above the golden oceans. The human myth of life's peak was no longer distant or unattainable. She had lived it, felt it, and emerged stronger than she had ever been. Her species had underestimated humans, yet their resilience, courage, and willingness to feel had reshaped her understanding of power. Ethan joined her, standing silently as the light of the stars reflected in their eyes. Xyra turned to him, her expression softening. "I understand now," she said. "It is not a weakness. It is a form of strength my people have ignored. Humans are remarkable, beyond what I imagined." She had faced danger, learned new ways of living, and allowed herself to feel fully. The human myth had revealed not just exhilaration or joy, but insight, resilience, and the extraordinary strength of connection. The palace seemed to hum with energy, reflecting the transformation within her. She knew that this was only the beginning. The lessons she had learned would guide her in governing, in understanding her people, and in embracing the full spectrum of life. Humans had shown her a path that was both challenging and rewarding, and she would follow it not blindly, but with awareness and courage. As night settled over Xyler 7, Xyra felt a peace she had never known. The battle was won, the myth proven real, and the lessons absorbed. She had experienced the human peak, and it had changed her forever. The alien queen, once skeptical and reserved, now embraced life fully, mind, body, and spirit united. She turned to Ethan one last time before the stars fully blanketed the sky. "Thank you," she said simply. "You have shown me a strength I never knew existed." And it had forever changed the way she would lead, live, and understand life. The days after the battle were filled with change. Xyler 7 seemed to breathe differently, as if the planet itself acknowledged what had occurred. The skies were brighter, the waters shimmered with golden reflections, and even the wind carried a gentle hum, whispering of possibility. Xyra walked through the palace halls, her steps deliberate, her mind alive with thoughts and plans. The lessons she had learned from humans were no longer just experiences. They were tools, guides for a new way of leading and living. Her advisors, once skeptical, had begun to notice the difference. They observed the Queen's presence and command, not through fear alone, but through respect, trust, and inspiration. Xyra had changed, and in her transformation she had elevated those around her. The humans, small in number but rich in wisdom and resilience, were now seen as equals, their perspectives valued in ways her species had never imagined. Ethan walked beside her as she reviewed reports from across the planet. The rival faction had retreated entirely, their defeat a lesson in the unexpected strength that humans had revealed. Xyra no longer saw the galaxy as a domain to dominate solely with power. She now understood that courage, awareness, connection, and the willingness to feel were equally vital to true strength. "Your Majesty," an advisor said, "the Council requests your presence. They wish to hear your plan for the future." Some still looked wary, their expressions guarded, but they listened as Xyra spoke. "For centuries, we have valued control, intellect, and strength above all else," she began. "We have dismissed emotions, sensation, and the myths of other species as weakness, but what we have witnessed is not weakness. It is power, strength that arises from awareness, courage, connection, and the willingness to experience life fully. Their strength is subtle yet undeniable, and it is a strength we can learn from. Humans will be welcomed as partners, as equals, sharing knowledge and insight that can guide us to greater heights." Later, Xyra walked with Ethan through the palace gardens, the golden light of the sun casting long reflections across the glowing paths. "You have transformed more than the council," Ethan said quietly. "You have transformed yourself, and in doing so, you have changed your people's future." "I had guidance, I had courage shown to me, I allowed myself to learn and feel fully. That is what humans have taught me, the power of embracing life completely." She realized that what she had experienced in battle, in learning, and in connection was only the beginning. The human way of life was a journey, a series of experiences that could always expand, grow, and deepen. Ethan glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the same energy she felt. "You have reached a point many humans never reach," he said. "You have engaged fully with life, courage, and trust. You have felt the myth, and you have learned its true power." And in doing so, they had shown her a new path for her people. The following weeks were dedicated to building this new era. Human knowledge and Xyleran skill combined in ways previously unimaginable. Schools and training centers were established, where humans and Xylerans learned from each other. Warriors were taught to integrate courage and presence with their physical and psychic abilities. Scientists combined human intuition with Xyleran technology to develop innovations that accelerated progress across the planet. Xyra watched these changes with pride. Her people were thriving, inspired by the lessons humans had shared. And she herself continued to grow, embracing sensations, awareness, and courage in her everyday life. She discovered that joy, curiosity, and exhilaration could coexist with authority and wisdom. She laughed more freely, moved with anticipation, and felt her own energy align with the planet's subtle vibrations. One evening, Xyra and Ethan stood atop the palace balcony, looking out over the glowing city below. Humans and Xylerans moved together in harmony, their interactions marked by trust, respect, and curiosity. It was a vision of a society transformed, and Xyra felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had witnessed strength not as domination, but as connection, awareness, and courage in action. "You have changed everything," Ethan said softly. "Your openness, your willingness to learn, has not only reshaped your people, but has created a bridge between worlds. That is what I have learned." It was not just exhilaration, but a deep alignment of mind, body, and spirit. She realized that she had reached the true essence of the human myth. It was not fleeting. It was a continuous force that could guide her people, and even the humans she had come to respect so deeply. The nights on Xyler 7 were filled with stars and quiet energy. Xyra walked alone through the gardens, feeling the subtle hum of the planet beneath her feet. She paused to watch the reflection of the stars on the golden waters, noticing for the first time how alive the world felt when experienced fully. She understood that myths could carry truths, and truths could shape reality. Humans had shown her this, and she had embraced it with courage and awareness. The following day, Xyra called a gathering of her people in the central plaza. Xylerans of all ranks stood, curious and attentive. Humans stood beside her, calm and confident, their presence a symbol of partnership and shared understanding. Xyra addressed the crowd, her voice strong and clear. "Today," she said, "we honor what has been learned, not from fear or domination, but from courage, trust, and awareness. Humans have shown us that life can be experienced fully, and that strength comes from embracing it. From this day forward, Xyler 7 will thrive not only on power, but on presence, connection, and courage. Let this be the dawn of a new era." Xyra felt the warmth of their recognition, not as blind obedience, but as respect born from understanding. Humans and Xylerans alike celebrated together, sharing laughter, stories, and joy. Xyra watched them, her chest alive with exhilaration, her heart full, and her mind clear. The myth was real, the strength was tangible, and it had reshaped everything. Later, as the city settled into calm, Xyra returned to the palace with Ethan. They walked through the halls, quiet but satisfied. Xyra paused at a window, looking at the glowing oceans below. She realized that she had learned more than a myth. She had learned a way to lead, a way to live, and a way to understand life itself. "You have shown me," she said softly, turning to Ethan, "that humans, though small and fragile, carry a strength that is extraordinary. They have taught me courage, awareness, and the joy of living fully. You have bridged worlds, Your Majesty, and in doing so, you have created a future worth living fully." She understood the human myth in all its depth, and she knew that it would guide her people, and the humans she had come to respect through countless generations to come. As the stars reflected on the golden waters, Xyra stood beside Ethan, feeling the pulse of life around them. She had faced skepticism, explored the unknown, and embraced sensations her species had long ignored. She had lived the human myth, and in doing so she had transformed herself and her world. Strength was no longer simply power. It was courage, awareness, and connection. And in that moment, the alien queen smiled, fully alive, fully aware, and fully ready to lead Xyler 7 into a future shaped by understanding, bravery, and the extraordinary resilience of humanity.